This meeting is being recorded.
Noted.
All right, welcome to the final presentation for the morning. This is team MC37. We'll have this 20-minute presentation followed by 10-minute Q&A, and then we will break for an hour and then resume the final three sessions at 1 o'clock. With that being said, let's get right into it, and I'll pass it off to team MC37, Lorenzo.
Okay, so I will begin sharing my screen, and I'll count down to the team. Everyone can see my screen, I hope.
Yep.
Okay, team, you ready?
Oh, yeah.
In 3, 2, go.
Hi, my name's Praveen, and these are my teammates Lorenzo and Saif. We are here to present our findings and recommendations for the city-owned parking lots in Hamilton. For the purpose of this analysis, we consolidated the Calais and the Passport data sets by standardizing the fields. We have also cleaned and prepared the data by focusing our analysis on the months of September and October for the years 2019 to 2021. We've also removed from the data set any lot that has missing data. By analyzing when and for how long someone parks, we were able to segment the users into 4 distinct groups. The first group of users, who we call here to stay, are users that typically park for 8+ hours, and they tend to arrive around the 8 to 9 a.m. mark on the weekdays. These could be our full-time employees who park and then go to work. The second group of users are who we call stay-a-whiles, and they typically park around the 2 to 8 hour mark. These users could be anyone from a part-time employee to someone catching a movie or having dinner. The third group of users that we identified are who we call the stick-arounds, and they typically park around the 1 to 1.5 hour mark. These could be users who are running some errands, doing some shopping, or just there for appointments. The last group of users are who we call the in and outs. And these users park for less than an hour and are likely there for a quick pickup or a drop-off, takeaways, or simply doing a coffee run. We also noticed that the different lots have a different mix of these user groups. For example, in this slide, lot 33 has a very small here to stay presence, while the stay a while are the biggest group. Lot 40, on the other hand, has a much higher representation of the here to stay users than the stay a while user group. We will be looking at the individual lot characteristics later in this presentation to try and understand why that is. The next thing we looked at was the hourly distribution of the arrival time of these user groups overall across all the lots. No surprises there. We see our office employee type here to stay, parking around the 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. period. The stay-a-whiles tend to spike around the hours of noon and 6 p.m. The noon parkers could be the lunch crowd. The 6 p.m. parkers could be the shoppers. We see increased activity for the stick-arounds between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. They are there for appointments during business hours, during the office hours. The in and out group mirrors the stick-arounds in that they also use the parking lot the most during typical office hours. Now, Lorenzo will walk us through the individual lots and their characteristics.
So first lot that we examined was lot 33. Unfortunately, the 2019 data was not available, but we made do with what we had. So here we can see that this is all during COVID. This area is on the mountain. This is near the James Street, Upper James access, and it is littered with light commercial areas. It's not too far from Mohawk College or St. Joe's Hospital, but there are a lot of businesses that run here. We believe that that group, the here to stays, makes up the bulk of likely the business owners or the full-time staff that are living in this area of 45 spaces. We can see the stay-a-whiles are fairly well represented in this zone. Very likely there are, I know like my kids had a violin in this area. There are areas that you may be needing to stay for a little bit of time if you're there for a restaurant or there for an appointment, learning a lesson or something of that nature. We can see with the stick-arounds fairly well represented here as well. There are a lot of restaurants and eateries in this area, so that does make sense. Or these could actually, both these groups even just be students that got up and walked if they needed to, until of course COVID hit. And then the in and outs, not very many in this area. Very likely those are going to be individuals that are picking up food or dropping people off at the various lesson venues available.
And we looked at the user group, the hourly distribution for this lot. And while most of it is pretty typical of the bigger picture, some of the things that stood out were the increased activity, the spikes around the 6 to 7, say the 6 to 7 and 8 p.m. marks for the user groups, the stay a whiles, the stick arounds, and the in and outs. Especially with the in and outs being very sparsely distributed across the entire day, with that spike at 8 o'clock. Over to you, Lorenzo.
And that sort of, we think, lends to the idea that there are some restaurants and eateries in the area, and those are when they would get more popular. Next, we have lot 36. So this is on James Street North. James Street North is a very prominent like pedestrian center. It is a successful business area that is not part of the BIAs of the city. I think it's actually something they're very proud of, that they have their own sort of thing going. We can see here we've got the full data sets for 2019 forward, and I think this lends to business as usual in 2019. We can see the here to stays that are very well represented. This is also the area that the Hamilton Barracks is located, so it's very possible that many of those here to stays could be military personnel working there, or shop owners that are working the whole day. We can see throughout 2019, our stay a whiles and our stick arounds very well represented, and we'll see the approximate times they really start to spike in the next slide. But this very likely lends to the idea that there's a vibrant nightlife on Jane Street North, and that's what the parking's mostly being used for. We can see, though, that suddenly, for some reason, in 2020, 2021, there's a significant drop in utilization across the board, except for the in and outs didn't change too much. We believe this correlates with COVID-19. Many of these shops were just outright closed, and only the necessary personnel, perhaps individuals at the barracks or shop owners, were in the area, but customers themselves would have been on the decline during this time.
We again look at the hourly distribution here for this lot, and what the here to stays are pretty typical. They park around the 8 to 10 a.m. Marks. The stay a whiles and the stick arounds also distributed within the business hours of the day, and a fairly big spike around the 6 p.m. mark. And the same thing with the in and outs. This group pretty much contained within the business hour, with little to no activity past the 6 p.m. mark.
So this, I think, really does show the nightlife aspect. Very rarely does the here to stays have a spike in the evening. Usually we see their spike is in the morning. So this, I think, indicates that there's a second life that comes alive here on James Street North, where restaurants and bars, they're opening up. Those are likely owners or bartenders that are going to be there till 2 in the morning. And then we can see the big spike there in our stay a whiles, because obviously if you're going to a restaurant, you're going to want to stay a while. And that really does spike around the 6 o'clock mark. So that there, we would think is synonymous with a vibrant nightlife. Our next lot is lot 40. This is one of the largest lots in the city, 635 lots. This lot is so big, I don't know if they still have it, but I remember there used to be like a little gas pump at that lot. I don't know if it was a novelty, but there's a gas station on City Hall property. This is where City Hall is located. It is the heart of the city. It is the heart of downtown. It is near the Hamilton GO station. It is near Jackson Square. It is near many residential areas. So this is a very, very prominent part of the city. We can see business as usual makes sense for such a vibrant part of the city. People have a lot of business to tend to at City Hall. So we have our here to stays, very likely city staff that are going to be there all day, there to service the city. And of course, we see that while business as usual was on in 2019, the stay a while is very well represented. Very likely individuals, perhaps part-time workers, or things that just took more time at City Hall than a few hours. Whereas our stick-arounds, we think these are the individuals filling out any forms or licenses or all the various things that you would need to do at City Hall that don't take too long, but do necessitate an extended stay. And then our in and outs, very prominent while the city was open. This is going to be a prominent drop-off spot. It's in the literally in the center of a lot of stuff going on downtown. The GO station's right across the street. So you have people maybe dropping people off to and helping them bring stuff to the GO station. So that made sense for business as usual. Now, this was a lot that was definitely affected by COVID-19. We know that City Hall had reduced or restricted services during COVID-19. So that makes sense for what we're seeing here for across the board. The here to stays drastic dip down as less staff are needed when you have reduced services being offered. With less staff and less services, it just makes sense that we'd see the stay a whiles and the stick arounds are also in decline. In and outs suffered a big decline there. People just weren't traveling. People are not using the GO station. People are not getting around. So we're guessing that this was a sad lot during COVID-19.
And the hourly distribution really shows that this lot is near City Hall. It's most of the activity contained within the office hours between 8 and 4 p.m. With little to no activity past that mark. Especially the here to stay group you can see that activity spike at 8 a.m. And a little bit of activity around the 9 a.m. mark, and then it's pretty sparse beyond that. So that's pretty typical of a lot that's close to City Hall. Over to you, Lorenzo.
And we can see too that while services are being offered at City Hall, which are wrapping up around 4 o'clock, that I think is a clear indicator there that the stick arounds and the in and outs, that's when they mostly are using the space. The stay a whiles do have a bit of spike in the evening, and that's likely because the area is in the center of some very nice restaurants and bars. Finally, we have lot 42. So this is an interesting lot. This lot is, while it's small, 39 spaces, it's also across the street from both General Hospital and a 5-story parking lot that I don't think the city owns, but very active area. This was one that we really saw a spike during a certain pandemic that we all experienced. So we can see business as usual in 2019. Across the board is pretty steady. The here to stay is very likely nursing, medical staff. There are a lot of specialist medical centers in the area as well. Your stay a whiles, very likely people maybe have appointments or visiting, and the stick arounds very specifically likely just going to visit somebody. And the in and outs would have just been dropping people off. These all suddenly had a gigantic spike during 2020 and 2021 during the pandemic. So clearly people wanted to go to the hospital while there was a pandemic on. We can see that very likely more staffing was needed in the areas as everybody's working overtime between 2020 and 2021. So we can see the here to stays really, really well represented throughout those 2 years. We can also see that everyone else needed to use the facilities, and we can see spikes in the stay a whiles and the stick arounds. So very likely this was due to the pandemic, people working overtime, people when available, visiting loved ones that may have been sick, or people needing to get tested for COVID, may have taken a good hour and a half waiting in line or what have you. The hospital clearly was very, very utilized during the pandemic across the board.
Sorry. So we looked at the hourly distribution, and it's pretty typical for a lot that's close to a hospital in the way that the different user groups are distributed. The here to stays, if you look at it, in most of the other lots, they are primarily contained to the 8 and 9 a.m. mark. Here, it's pretty well distributed across from 7 a.m. to around noon, and that's pretty unique to a lot that's close to the hospital. The stay a whiles and the stick arounds, again, distributed pretty typically within the hospital visiting hours, with very little activity in the in and out group. Lorenzo?
And it's also interesting to note that visiting hours wrap up around 7, 8 o'clock, and that's pretty much where we see the parking take a sharp decline is as at that time. So we believe that many of the user groups are there utilizing the hospital either to visit or for those appointments that may require a little bit more time, but that would wrap up before 7 o'clock.
So we saw this as a people problem and not a cost problem. Our approach was that we used the golden circle philosophy, where we focused on the why, because at the end of the day, you have to realize and you have to figure out why someone is doing or why these users have to use a particular parking lot. So based on the why, what we did was that we analyzed the duration of usage and the frequency of usage and the days of usage. And then that gave us 4 distinct user groups in terms of the users of the parking lots. The here to stays were the ones who were using it more than 8 hours. The stay a whiles were the ones who were using it between 2 to 8 hours. And then the stick arounds were the ones who were using it from 1 to 1.5 hours. And the in and outs were the ones who were using it for less than 1 hour. So not all users were equal, because at the end of the day, there is a revenue element attached to this whole operation. These parking lots generate revenue for the city. And then once we dove deeper into the utility numbers, we saw that 80% of the utilization of these lots was being done by 20% of the users. That means these were our here to stays and typically people who are full-time working who use these lots 5 days a week. And this is the segment that the city should focus on more, because once you secure this segment, you get to secure your 80% of the revenue, and then you can figure out how to maximize the utility for the other 20%. Seeing and analyzing the lots individually, we were able to figure out that each of the parking lot had a unique mix of users. The reason for that is that the geographical location of the lot is extremely important. Things that are right next to the lot matter, and then that dictates what type of user is going to end up using that particular lot. There is no cookie cutter solution for every lot. You have to study the trends and patterns of each lot individually and come up with a plan that maximizes the utility for each of those lots. One thing the city could do is you could develop an application that, because for me and for anyone who I've talked to, the biggest hassle or the biggest pain point for everyone is that once you decide to go into a busy area, it takes you 15 to 20 minutes just to find a parking spot. You have to take a lap of the parking lot. You have to take a few laps of the blocks till you find the right parking space. So if there was an application where you could just book your slot in advance, let's say 15 to 30 minutes before you reach there, that way when you get there, you don't have to look for a slot or a spot. You just know where you're going and you just go to your specific book spot and you can just book that, and that reduces congestions in the lot. That reduces congestions on the roads as well, and it's hassle-free and time-saving for everyone. Like I said before, that 20% of the users are the bulk of the revenue, so the city could develop schemes or strategies around those users. Our frequent users are our main source of income, so they can have monthly passes or even quarterly passes for those people, and then you at least secure that revenue, and then you can focus on the remainder of the users. Another thing the city can do is maybe the City of Hamilton or website can have like an online capacity meter which is live, and then because now everything is digital, whenever someone punches in, you have the data for the cars, and based on the real-time utility of the lot, that there can be a gauge for every parking lot, and it fills, and so when I am driving there, I can just pull up the website and see which lot is full and which has the capacity. So instead of moving around and trying to find a place to park, I know beforehand where I have to go, and it saves me time and it frees the road from traffic. And these were our key insights and recommendations, and we are open for any questions that you guys have.
All right, thanks very much for that presentation, gentlemen. I'll open up the floor first to Sharon and then Paul.
Thank you, guys. This was a really great presentation. I like this story you shaped around your analysis because it's really important. Like the analysis, the findings can be great, but the way we're communicating, it's also really important. Just a small recommendation for your visualization. If you open one of the charts that you had the user group, like distribution hourly or weekly, yeah, here. So like you see how you have like the 4 red lines, and then in the measure names user group, you have like 4 colors, like you repeated, basically, it's the same metric. So because you have a label for each of the graphs, I don't think you need to repeat like 4 times the same metric, even though it belongs to a separate chart. Just, and then also in terms of the color coding, maybe like, I know you want to be consistent. So, but I think it's like maybe choosing a different color for each chart would be better than like it's just more on the greener side. But that's the 2, like the recommendations I had, and it was great. I really enjoyed your work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Paul?
So I guess it can go next year. So yeah, first off, I want to say I really liked how you guys started with, here's our user groups, here's why we picked them, and then you took those user groups through the entire presentation, and it helped me as an observer kind of, you know, get excited about the next lot. Like, oh, what's this going to be like? Like, what's the here to stay is going to be like on this next one? So I think you guys did a really, really great job on that. I don't have any specific questions about your analysis. I think it was pretty clear. One thing maybe I would just kind of ask, and maybe if you guys want to speculate a little bit, or maybe think about kind of where you would take this in the future, is you were kind of talking around, you know, speculating on why the here just stays were high or the stick arounds were high. Maybe what would you guys do if you had maybe another week or something like that to maybe validate some of those assumptions? Have you guys given any thought to that?
I think in terms of data, it would be nice if there was more demographic information or information around who the users are. The fact that we just have information on the duration and the time they start their parking, we can only speculate at this point. We could do some observational. If you only had a week, we could do some observational, you know, we could go to a lot, look at who's parking, and, you know, maybe potentially do some surveys to find out.
Or even,
Yeah.
Go ahead, Saif.
Because we had to go with the geographical location of the lot and the duration and the timings, and these was the only 3 things that we had. And if we had, let's say, that the age brackets and some other demographic data, I think that would have helped us even more fine-tune what the insights were.
And you know, if we had, like, obviously, you know, it's now like 2022 is now, so we're not going to have too much that we can go on, so we had to speculate, but yeah, I agree that if we could have looked at maybe a little bit more of the local demographics, what is really going on, we had to literally guess by what we assumed activity was going on by hour. So yeah, that would have been pretty fantastic had we more time. We also, because some of these lots are like smaller, we know that things like apps require like infrastructure and sensors and stuff like that. So it would have been neat to have if we could have had some sort of predictor about one of the lots that may have been one of the perfect places to test new sensor technology or something like that for app utilization, and then, you know, been able to make some predictions in that capacity. Luckily, though, we had I'm a local Hamiltonian, so I've been to all these areas, so we were able to leverage those heuristics a bit for our analysis.
Awesome, thanks, guys.
Vivek.
Few questions. You said at the beginning of the presentation that there were some data missing and you had to adjust. Can you highlight on that what data was missing?
So for lot 33, we had data for, it was what, November and December, but not for October and September. So instead of using the month later, we just decided that we would we leave it out. We saw the business as usual in some of the other spots like James Street North. So yeah, that was just the decision we made. We didn't have the data, and just given the time that we had, instead of scrambling, we were just like, all right, we'll just use what we've got. Do you want to speak to any of that, Praveen, as well?
And yeah, no, for sure. And I think as part of the scope of this project, we were told to stick to a couple of the months for each of the years. And we were also given information on lots that had missing data. So we were able to just remove those from the mix, because they wouldn't be comparable between the 3 years. And that would have thrown off our analysis.
Thank you. And another thing is already some judges already talked about. I really like the way you started telling the story about the data. You know, I will agree with you with yellow color and 3 green color, because you are not only telling the users, you are guiding them, saying that, okay, here to stays are the biggest buck for your parking lot, because they are the biggest contributor, I believe, from the data. And then all 3 are mix of that. So I really like the distinction between both. Other thing I like is you maintain the color throughout your presentation, all the graph. So I'm not confused by having too many different colors. I'm very clear, because you define at the beginning and you were consistent throughout that. So I really like that. So that was one thing. And then last one is, what was the criteria for average? Did you take, you have average line, that red color line. I agree with Shireen, what she told, that it should be like one legend. But what was the criteria for average? Was it like a total starting from 0 to 24, all average? Or because I see ups and downs, so it cannot be all same. So what was the criteria?
So for those cars, let's say that parked at 9 a.m., that is how long they stayed. That's the average of how long they stayed. So between their entry time and their exit time, the duration, and that's the average for all the cars that parked at 9 a.m., right? And that's why it changes as you progress along each hour, because for each hour, the number of cars that parked probably didn't stay as long as the cars that parked a little earlier, right? And that really tells a story, because especially if you look at the here to stays, and the fact that the 8 o'clock parkers are the ones that have the highest duration, it speaks to the fact that they are the ones who stayed for the whole 8 hours. They were at work and things like that. And the people who maybe parked during the afternoons didn't stay as long. Is kind of my idea behind that.
And my last question, what tool you use to create a graph?
Tableau. Tableau and a little bit of Excel.
First Excel, and then Excel doesn't look as nice as
Excel
Tableau.
is the king.
Excel is the king. Absolutely.
Excel is great, but Tableau allowed us to very rapidly make the modifications that we needed to make to help tell that story.
Thank you. That's all from my side.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Juliana.
Great job, guys. With so much of this evaluation focused on storytelling, I think you really nailed that. Your pacing was excellent, which is great for a presentation. I really like your fun user group titles. I wish that you had have included the hours that were associated with those in your legend, because by the time we got to lot 40, I couldn't remember what they were anymore. but still really good. Your visuals were excellent in telling the story. It, for me, like just looking at it from the perspective of the city and the lack of information that we have on the users, I really wish that there had been that time for you guys to go and calibrate the difference between the stay a whiles and the here to stays, where we had lots where they maxed out so early. But like overall, like really great presentation, and thank you.
Thank you.
Because for our first phase, what we did was we did an analysis of what the occupation breakdown for city of Hamilton was. And I mean, if we had time, we would have gone into more detail, and we would have even subdivided the occupations into subgroups. And I think that would have been a fascinating analysis.
Oh, for sure. Like I can see what it could be, and like it's so interesting. But yeah, no, I know you guys had a half day and a night, so
Yeah.
We used it as best we could, though.
I very much appreciate what you were able to present, and then also seeing like, you know, the behavior of the lots. I'm really sad that it happened that lot 33 was missing from 2019, because it was the Mohawk College factor that really affects that lot, and we didn't get to see it now. So
That like that's part of this story. Like I did want to include with the Mohawk, like, but unfortunately the data wasn't there to support it. But I'm pretty sure there would have been a decent amount of stay a whiles that, you know, it's close enough to Mohawk that you can walk and, you know, attend your class or do whatever. It probably would have been a gem for any Mohawk student that knew about it, because it is like, if you go to the parking lot, it is a very strange parking lot. It's like hidden. It's a hidden gem of a parking lot. So yeah, unfortunately that would have been nice. So we just sort of guessed that it would have been used during 2019.
And for that one, like it's not just Mohawk, it's also St.
Joe's
Joe's.
as
So like I am a bit surprised that it didn't have those longer durations. Like there's definitely insights to find from it, but yeah, no, I see the potential. Like your visuals really show the story, and it's just like, if we could just refine that a bit, it would be just so amazingly informative. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
I think very
go ahead.
last comment. Sorry, very last comment is because the parking lot that you analyze, each one has a different capacity. So you can take your analysis to next level by normalizing data, saying that one has 50, another 25. So obviously 25 will have less hours, but how about if we normalize, like, you know, bring it all to the same level and then check about the utilization. And when you compare actual utilization, could be a different perspective from the data point.
No,
That's
definitely.
interesting.
Definitely.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah, we didn't think about that. Thank you for that.
Great job, you guys.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks for that presentation. That was group MC37. And that wraps up our morning session. We'll now pause for an hour or 55 minutes, and we will come back at 1 o'clock. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you so much, guys. It was
Bye-bye.
great. Lots of fun.
Thanks, guys.